Belgium is a key trade and investment partner for Nigeria, particularly in crude oil refining, maritime logistics, and manufacturing. As a major importer of Nigerian crude, Belgium refines and redistributes petroleum products across Europe. Beyond energy, Belgian businesses are active in infrastructure, logistics, and industrial sectors, while Nigerian companies seek greater access to European markets and technology transfer. With growing opportunities in trade, innovation, and sustainability, how can both nations strengthen economic ties and overcome key challenges?
Welcome to this episode of Energy TV. I'm Francis Jakpor.
And I am Sheriff Aderibigbe, and we will be your host on today's episode.
Belgium and Nigeria have strong bilateral relations that date back to 1961. Both countries have common interests that cut across human rights, anti-corruption, climate action, and the rest of them. But more importantly, Belgium is a key refiner of crude oil, and there are burgeoning opportunities in energy, pharmaceuticals, construction, and maritime. And we can have tighter, stronger and more potentially stronger bilateral relations. This is why we have in the studio His Excellency Ambassador Pieter Leenknegt is the Ambassador of Belgium to Nigeria. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just to kick off, for the benefit of our guests who may not know so much about the bilateral relations between Nigeria and Belgium, it dates back to 1961. And we are still exploring opportunities for stronger bilateral relations. Why do you think?
Well, I mean, these relations have been quite pluriform until now, and they are getting into something very diverse, also in terms of cultural context, people to people. If you look at the profile of the companies from Belgium that are already in Nigeria, they do very, very diverse things. They're involved in very different sectors, activities, lines, and all of that. Plus, there's a few interesting new developments also with, for instance, for the first time since a year and a half ago, a Nigerian plantation group that acquired a Belgian plantation group, including also a company near Ghent in Belgium. So that is, I think, the first properly Nigerian investment in Belgium to speak of, and of which, of course, we'd be happy also to see more of that. But that, I think, is an interesting development. Now, as far as Belgium and Nigeria is concerned, we'll talk about all the things that we have planned and stored up for 2025 to happen. But I can also mention that we are currently in the process of building a new chancery building for our embassy, which will also kind of like literally and physically implant Belgium a bit more firmly into Nigeria. We'll be a landlord there, so this is actually also one of those signs to say we are here to stay.
Awesome. So what are your key priority areas in terms of investment in Nigeria, Belgium? We know your Belgium is a key refiner of crude oil, well until Dangote refineries came on board. But then again, what are your priority areas as a European partner?
Well, those priority areas, I think, are going to be the sum of the priority areas of the Belgian companies that come here to invest, rather than a big master plan made up by the Belgian state. We don't have any state-owned enterprises, so there's none of that. But what we have had historically is a strong presence by our dredgers and by other companies with a bit of a maritime orientation. So the whole land reclaiming activity in Eco-Atlantic has been done by Belgian dredgers, but also in Bonny Island and in other places we've seen much of that activity. Our Port of Antwerp is also very active, local, looking into port development wherever possible, not just maritime ports, but also inland waterways. That's actually where probably the biggest push can be expected in the coming months and years. There's Belgians looking into the health sector, pharmaceuticals, but also medical equipment maintenance. So they see not only the size of the market, but sometimes Belgian companies also bring specific expertise, which is exactly tailored to the kind of place that we're talking about here. Like when you want to produce vaccines in a country in the global south, you might want to think also about bringing that to a small production scale so as to lower production costs so that you can actually also produce more vaccines than for less money. And that's where we also have some added value to offer. Or for instance, when it comes to the cold chain, we have companies who are able to offer solutions that allow you to transport food products, but also pharmaceuticals, for 48 hours on battery systems that don't need constant power supply, which is of course helpful in a country like Nigeria where that power supply is not constantly guaranteed. So we have all of these players coming in with either very innovative solutions or things that are tailored to the specific needs. And that the solutions keep on coming, and usually as an embassy, when a market player is on the verge of entering the Nigerian market, then we hear about it, because it's still considered not such an easy place to start investing in or to actually incorporate into. So this is also how there's very few things that actually slip from our attention.
Thank you. Earlier, you mentioned a Nigerian plantation company, acquiring a Belgian company. So I'm looking at it from this perspective. What are, the things core that the embassy does to support Nigerian businesses in terms of, Nigerian businesses that want to maybe set up shop, in Belgium, across
Yes.
Belgium?
Well, the first part of my answer, invariably and without hesitation, should be that is actually not the job of the Belgian embassy in Nigeria. We are doing things in the opposite direction. So we are facilitating investment activities for Belgian companies in Nigeria. Now, that is also the reason why I wasn't present at the Business Forum in Brussels last year that is organized there, precisely because in my mind it was all about facilitating investment for Nigerian companies into Belgium, into the EU, in which case it's actually the Nigerian embassy in Brussels that has the main role. And of course then chambers of commerce such as the ACP-CBL Chamber of Commerce, they step in and they can come in. But in effect, the Business Forum was also about Belgians investing in Nigeria. Now that I've grasped this, you can bet on my presence there in October. But this being said, there are actors that have as their calling and as their jobs to do precisely that, of course, to facilitate the entry of Nigerian market players into the Belgian market. And my message for them is they're absolutely welcome.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier the port of Antwerp. I don't know if you have an idea that Nigerians usually refer to, fairly used goods as Belgium.
Yes.
And not in a derogatory manner, because Belgian goods, we just feel like it's of higher quality than, some type of goods that come from somewhere else. But moving on, let's look at the role, that Belgium plays as a strategic partner, with Nigeria, especially as it concerns, energy transition. And, you talked earlier about investments in dredging, that you have Belgian companies that helps with dredging and all that. But let's particularly focus on, energy transition. The world is all about, moving to clean energy. So what role does, your country play?
Yes, let me also first debunk a myth. I could also keep the myth alive. Because if you look at the naked figures, then it says that Belgium represents 40% of the EU's exports into Nigeria. 40% as a small country of 11 million inhabitants. That's huge. More than 90% of that export is refined oil. Now, of course, this is bound to change because with the Dangote refinery in Lekki, by the way, Lekki port also having benefited of the activity of Belgian dredgers, but that's just an aside. And the other refineries, of course, the state-owned ones, when they come up to speed, then this whole story will probably change very swiftly. Now, is that dramatic? And that's where I start debunking the myth. Not necessarily for Belgium, because that refined oil, and you refer to the port of Antwerp, the reason why this is all considered as a Belgian export product is because it goes through the port of Antwerp. Now, it doesn't mean all that oil is being refined in Belgium in the first place. We are not like the European refinement capital or anything like that. So much of that also comes from our neighboring countries. So this is actually, it's, let's say, a common challenge, but I think also it should be a common understanding that there's nothing logical about Nigeria exporting oil to Europe crudely and then getting it back refined, whereas when those activities could and should be done locally. Without, at of course, much lesser cost. So indeed, our trade relations do have to evolve. Now, I also have a bit of good news when it comes to that other part, crude oil exports from Nigeria to Belgium. Until a long time, until very recently, that's how I should say it, also represented the biggest export product of Nigeria into Belgium. But here's my bit of good news. I just printed out a bubble chart. A bubble chart from Trade Explorer, which is a wonderful application by the Belgian Agency for Foreign Trade. And I found out that for the first time I checked, the biggest export product from Nigeria to Belgium is now cocoa and cocoa preparations, with crude oil coming as a not so distant, but still a second. Right? And so these are definitely now the two mainstay exports from Nigeria. And if, as far as I'm concerned, the more cocoa, the better. So we also had an exchange of experiences event in Brussels right after the World Cocoa Conference last 2024, when also Belgium was hosting the World Cocoa Conference in Brussels. Afterwards, we had this workshop at a smaller level with a representative of each one of the main cocoa exporting countries in the world, Nigeria being one of them, in order also to see how, what experiences could be learned collectively. Now, I know, for having now also done a bit of research and done a bit of travel in the southeast, notably in Oyo State, and having visited the Cocoa Research Institute of Nigeria. What I found out there is that Nigeria has slipped somehow in the global ranking of cocoa exporters, but of course could pick up quickly again, and there's no reason why they should let Cameroon and others take precedence. This is all about, I think, also tenacity, and that's where I will bring in a little anecdote. The one time I met with Aliko Dangote in Lagos last summer, I overheard him speak to a governor. I won't say from which state, but what he said was something that stuck in my mind, as it often happens, of course, with prophecies by prominent CEOs. So what he was telling to that governor is, Singapore has done so well over the last decades, and you could probably also say that about other Asian tigers, because it focused on a limited number of sectors, activities that it really wanted to excel in. And that's how they became big. And as we speak, there's a Singaporean state visit happening in Belgium. And with Belgium and Singapore, we're both very open economies, very trade-oriented and all of that, but there's no denying Singapore has done incredibly well for itself through such a procedure. Now, it was Aliko Dangote's belief that for Nigeria, it's the same. You can't run after each and every fashionable thing and then just leave it once it's become unfashionable again. That specifically, if you want to improve and to enhance trade in, for instance, agricultural produce, and especially in processed goods or more high-end products in the agricultural sector, then you have to stay the course. And then you have to stay with your product and not just wait until it's become gold and trash it again when it has become bronze again. So that is where I definitely hope that when it comes to the cocoa sector, for instance, that Nigerians, when they go into cocoa farming, that they also do it by conviction and by love for the product, because that is probably going to be the key to success in such endeavors. And then, of course, with Belgium being one of the big chocolate producers in the world, there's a very good match there.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting to know that cocoa is coming up second, compared to crude oil, which has been our mainstay.
No. It's coming up first.
Coming up first. Absolutely. This is even more.
Since this year.
Yeah, so you mentioned something. You mentioned that Nigeria is not exactly the easiest place to do business. So in terms of, I know sanctity of contracts comes up, but what other investment improvements would you like to, destination improvements would you like to see that can attract Belgian investments in Nigeria?
Well, of course, one of the things that comes up very often when you talk with business people is power supply, steady power supply, except in a few sectors where you can perhaps do without it. Power supply is going to be of utmost importance. For instance, for a shrimp fisher, it's probably not going to be the main thing. Then, in his case, fuel is going to be and oil is going to be an important input. But for nearly anybody who wants to do something at an industrial scale, you need a constant power supply. That's one thing. Security is, of course, another one, although I would think that for the Belgian investors that are already on the spot, it's perhaps less of an issue because the overly large majority of them is in Lagos. And I think if there's one of the good news stories about Nigeria as of late, it would be that the security situation in Lagos has drastically improved. When I hear the stories about my predecessors and the security, restrictions and precautions they needed to take when they visited Lagos, today is a completely other story. So that's why I wouldn't put it too high on my list or not too much on it, except perhaps as a bit of a more of a remote caution. That is, of course, what happens in the north, and I'm not only thinking of northeast and Lake Chad, but also northwest. What happens there has, of course, also a tangible impact on the rest of the country. There's not a need of much time lapse between an infiltration of a terrorist group in some northwestern state until they also manage to find their way to the southwest. And then before you know, then also the gates of Lagos are being reached. And so you would not want to get into a situation whereby, you would ideally, of course, want to hope and for the good of the whole population that the whole territory would be pacified and insecurity free. But at the very least for investors, places like Abuja and Lagos should be those havens of security where they can operate freely. But then, last but not least, I'd say transparency in government procurement is also going to be high on the list. I'd say you could open that up to governance more generally. You could, in a very polite way, bring it down to things like bureaucracy, in a little more controversial but still realistic way, mention corruption as part of those issues. I think that cluster is definitely also in need of improvement in order for investors to really feel at ease in what they do.
Thank you.
But this being said, of course, there's no denying the yields for those who weather the storms and for those who manage to get through the challenges are enormous. And that's a message we also often bring. But it hinges on the importance of local partners. It's not totally unrelated to the governance issues I just mentioned. It hinges on things like that.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's gratifying to know now. But I asked Thomas the same question when I interviewed him. The time lag between when investments are discussed,
yes,
and when they actually and when it takes a while. So will these be the issues that make it take a while? If these issues are addressed,
undeniably so. Undeniably so. I've only been in Nigeria now for 16 months, but that's something I can say without hesitation. Undeniably so. I now realize that I didn't actually address your question about the energy transition.
Yes, I was going to come back to that actually.
I ended up in chocolate.
Yes. Yes, sir.
But of course, the energy transition discussion is a very important one. Yeah. And I'm very glad that some Belgian folks kind of spurred me into taking part in the recent Nigeria International Energy Summit as a panelist. Although at the end, I could only conclude that a better name for that conference would have been Nigeria Fossil Fuel Summit. Okay. So indeed, the way we look at energy in Europe is in a much broader range. Actually, I would also say increasingly or almost exclusively focusing now on other than fossil fuels. And that is something for Nigeria also to keep in mind. I mean, the whole point about sustainable development is there is fundamentally no sustainable way to source fossil fuels. Eventually, you run out of them. And there might be reasons why even before you run out of them, that they will become stranded assets. So I think we all have an interest in cooperating in the development of other energies. And I hear people like Tony Elumelu say that, yes, we need to still develop our oil fields and our gas fields and all of that precisely to finance that energy transition. Unfortunately, for the time being, I don't see much of that transition happening. I mean, solar energy represents, what, 2% of the power supply in Nigeria. In Belgium, by now, we're between 15 and 20%, and we have so much less sun. It's all about rain and wind, not about sun in Belgium. So there's definitely fruits to be reaped in a massive way. Our Dutch friends recently had a trade mission in Nigeria entirely focused on solar energy. The EU is exclusively investing in renewables when it comes to energy, and also the renewable energy has a big chunk in what we call the global gateway investments of the EU for reconstruction and development, which is not strictly speaking an EU organization or institution, because also Nigeria is now a shareholder. But they also made it very clear we cannot be in investment upstream in oil and gas anymore. So this is gonna be, and not even very much into pipelines anymore. That's not even upstream. You know, even for the midstream, that's where, and downstream, that's where such investments now come with big hurdles. And I mean, the logic is one of a Green Deal, whereby it's not us, it's the planet that sets us a deadline, and that deadline is 2040 in order not to run into trouble by 2050. So we all have to, at least as Europeans, we still hold the fort and hold the belief very strongly that that means that we can't leave any region in the world behind from that point of view. And therefore, for instance, Belgium is working on green hydrogen with other EU member states and with a country like Namibia. Namibia is getting quite big now in the storage of green hydrogen and in using it as a maritime transportation fuel and a road transportation fuel. Now, as far as I can see as an ambassador here, there's none of the inputs that Namibia has that Nigeria could not muster in terms of finance, in terms of space, in terms of coastline. Everything is there. It's just a matter of making it work. So that is one of the key messages I want to push. That's one thing. But then when it comes to waste to energy solutions, Belgian companies also have very sound solutions. Machinery which is already being used now in Nigeria, for instance, on palm oil plantations where palm kernels are being burnt, and then this is being transformed into energy rather than just throwing away the palm kernels as waste. But there's many more entrepreneurs from Belgium who can offer solutions on the scale of, you know, a city's waste management, or at the level of a company. Storage and then processing of waste into energy is something that will definitely also figure in a big way in the trade mission we will have later in the year, which is focusing on the agricultural sector. Again, I think a sign of the times. We're not bringing refiners here or oil barons or anything like that. We are bringing companies that could make a match with their agricultural counterparts in Nigeria in order to develop this whole other sector. Now, also specifically in that agricultural sector, we then think about storage, about transport in order to make the harvest to market losses diminish drastically, and also about waste to energy, agricultural waste to energy solutions. So that is part of the focus. And this is a focus that comes mostly from our companies themselves, but I wouldn't have chosen it any more aptly. So there is this whole push towards diversification of our trade and investments, and also diversification in terms of the green energy transition.
Thank you so much for that. Sir.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, we have a lot, the youth population here in Nigeria is burgeoning, right? So I've heard you mention so many initiatives you've got in the pipeline, but is there any plan for human capital development, technology transfer, exchange programs, things that the youth could benefit from?
Yes. Well, I mean, there are a few things already going on. There are some universities in Belgium, and again, they're mostly in the agronomist field, which have had a tradition of attracting Nigerian PhD students, and also working and exchanging with 5 or 6 institutions, academic institutions, including, for instance, the University of Ibadan here in Nigeria. And most of it is actually also about trying to improve agricultural produce, to make it attractive, or even in some cases, in order to make it eligible for the European markets in terms of toxins reduction and so on. So that involves also some students. Typically, those are also the same universities that attract most of the Nigerian Erasmus students to Belgium. The EU as a whole, I think we easily attract something like 6 or 7% of all Nigerian Erasmus students to the EU on an annual basis, which is again much more than our demographic weight in the EU, where we as a country have 11 million extrapolated on the 450 million of the EU. Yes, I mean, we're rather tiny, right? So that's one thing. Now, when it comes to youth, of course, you don't only think about studying, but also about chances for employment. Now, again, that's also where trade diversification and a green transition can help, because if there's any sector that is really poor in creating employment, I would say it's fossil fuels extraction. In terms of what it generates in capital, it actually helps very few people into jobs. And then it also has the nasty habit of attracting all of the brightest people of a country into an activity that is actually not, requiring much brain power, let's be clear. So, increased opportunities in the agricultural sector and in the tech sector, and also in renewable energies, which are more labor intensive, is automatically going to draw in more employment chances for young people who want to do something else than just fossil fuels production, or getting rich quickly in that case, which anyhow then is just going to be something for the very few. So there's a way to get rich sustainably, probably, in just staying the course in those other activities. And to give you one other example, even when it comes to soil decontamination, I mean, after all in Nigeria, in the Niger Delta, we have soil that has become very polluted because of oil spills, Ogoniland and so on. So a Belgian company was selected to do some of the more complex cleanup work there. And so when I talk with the entrepreneur and say, what did you have in mind in terms of interacting with local communities and, reaching out to them, he said, it's very simple. I'm going to employ tens and hundreds and perhaps thousands of people who will learn skills that they then can apply even beyond Ogoniland. So, I mean, I don't have to build any schools or any hospitals to make myself popular. I'm creating jobs right out of hand.
More sustainable.
And that was his answer, and I thought it was a correct answer. I mean, stay in your core line of activity, and if that generates employment, what better can you do?
So, but what should Nigerian applicants, visa applicants, look out for? If for people who are denied, for instance, what should they have done differently that would have enabled them to?
Well, I mean, there are very different kinds of scenarios. When it's about bona fide businessman, I think you will hear very little to no complaints, except if they have had visa refusals previously with other EU member states or something like that, and that they get then a new refusal. Most of the denied visas in our case are tourist visas. of people who simply don't offer enough proof that they have the means of subsistence to pay for their hotel or to pay for their upkeep when they visit Belgium. And I mean, it's up to them to make that case that they do have those means of subsistence. So where we get an 80% denial rate would be in tourist visas. Now, the good news is that we've recently also split up those two cohorts so that we don't make business people and government officials, well, government officials never had to wait. They have their own procedures and all of that. But the business people don't have to wait in the queue even to get a visa appointment just because there's so many people who want for one or another reason to travel to Belgium and don't, frankly, do not qualify. So we made two different procedures so that the business people now can have, let's say, more of a red carpet treatment. And so they will find out that if they apply to our visa handler today for an online, if they apply online for an appointment, they'll probably get the appointment tomorrow or the day after. And again, as long as you're having an invitation by somebody in Belgium, a business partner, and that you can prove that you have enough means of subsistence, that usually does the job. Unless, of course, in the past, if there have been cases of visa denial for reasons of fake documents or I don't know what, then of course you're getting yourself stuck quite quickly. But really, when it comes to business relations and trade and investment, I cannot imagine that visa issues are really a stumbling block nowadays.
All right, so thank you so much for your time. I would like to cap it up with this.
Yes.
For over 60 years, Belgium and Nigeria has had very good relationships. You've talked about a whole lot of the businesses, but looking into the future, how do you think we can unlock new opportunities? Especially considering that Nigeria is a developing country, and we have a whole lot to learn from Belgium, a whole lot of things that we can learn in terms of economic growth, development, sustainable development for the country. So what do you see as how our relations, how we can unlock unlock new frontiers for the country, in terms of development?
Yes, well, when it comes to development, I would say Nigeria is also a middle-income country with lots of potential in its own right. I'm not sure that Belgium always has the advice in terms of what kind of a course Nigeria should steer. I think many of the right impulses, most of them, will come from Nigeria itself. You have a rather vibrant press as well, so I think the right signals do pop up. There's the voice of the population can be heard. Criticism is allowed. There is a government and opposition dynamic. So all of this, I think, is good news when it comes to the development of the country. It's mainly, as Belgians, we're one of the very few countries in Europe that have managed to keep inequality low or not to have it increasing over the COVID years. We think it's a value in itself if income inequality in a country is not becoming too exacerbated. We don't want to become a society like the United States, where you have 0.1% of the super rich who command 60% of all the nation's wealth, and then everyone else who gets angry, and these things do translate in the ballot box, let's be clear. Now, of course, on the African continent, Gini coefficients tend to be very high. So I think a way to unlock much wealth and health and many other things that come with it would be a redistribution of wealth. And I think there are also interesting initiatives from the tax front. A few very talented people that the president here has appointed who are really able to think outside the box when it comes to redistribution. And actually, Lagos State has also shown the way how you set up credible, progressive tax system, more transparent, and that is also then seen to be more fair. At the same time, how do you say that? Avoiding free riders altogether, but also having more people integrated into it. Because whatever way you look at it, in the end, it's going to be internal revenue generation that will do the job of development. Nobody else is going to do it for you. And that's also, and I'm very candid about that. When we look at the West African sub-region, there's like at least 5 or 6 countries that are also partner countries of the Belgian Development Cooperation, bilateral development cooperation. That means we have government-to-government programs. Now, some of these programs have also run into scaling down because of coup d'etats and all of that. But Nigeria was never one of those countries for which we have government-to-government sectoral development cooperation. And for the reason that Nigeria, unlike all these LDCs, least developed countries in the region, is perfectly capable with an equitable and a strong tax system to generate enough revenue to make its nation, its population, its economy prosper. So that is a task that no donor can do for Nigeria, and that you have very talented people for, and I think it's a matter of heeding the call of those talented people and being blunt and brave. And of course, the times are not necessarily easy, and there's other very brave reform efforts going on that then also make the country sometimes, as a side effect, a bit more vulnerable left and right. But definitely fiscal reform, I think, is very potentially very promising, and I think very important also in the long run for the economic health and for the taking off of Nigeria's economy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I just wanted to cap off with your upcoming business forum in Belgium, and what's the sell for Nigerian business people who want to participate in it?
Well, the sale there is that I told you about that one company that Nigeria invested in Belgium. There's so many more that could be considered. So in a way, Europe is probably, at least Western Europe and Belgium, is still a bit of a terra incognita for Nigerian companies to actually go and invest there. So that's one thing. Secondly, it's also a good place to meet Belgian companies that have either already invested in Nigeria or on the brink of doing so, to partner up in a multitude of sectors. I understand, interestingly, the very first edition of that business forum was specifically on non-oil sector, which I like very much because, again, it kind of sets the message very loud and clear. And then last year there was a bit of a focus on the agriculture and the medical sector, where we just have a few new entrants from Belgium into the Nigerian market. This year I think it's going to be even a bit more widely spread and going to be more business to business oriented than last year. So these are, I think, all good incentives for Nigerian entrepreneurs to take part, or officials, or a good blend of them. And then let's also not forget that then almost 1 month after that business forum in October in Brussels, we will have that agricultural focused trade mission from Belgium, organized by the Flanders region of Belgium, here in Nigeria to Abuja and Lagos in November.
Oh, we certainly look forward to the promising future we'll have with Belgium.
Sure do. Thank you very much to our viewers for listening in. We've had with us His Excellency Pieter Leenknegt. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He's the ambassador of Belgium to Nigeria. And we've been discussing how to unlock new frontiers in Belgium-Nigeria relationships. Part of the key takeaways is that collaboration is important. It is essential. Nigeria must continue to collaborate with, external countries, more developed countries, who we can learn from, and we must continue to create an enabling environment to unlock new frontiers for growth and sustainable development. Until next time, I am Sheriff Aderibigbe.
And I'm Francis Jakpor.
Thank you for watching.